Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Indie Diarist podcast, a show on the human stories behind indie game development. Speaking to you today is your loyal Indie Diarist and host, Anthony L. Wolf, and one with a cold at that. Writer, narrative designer, senior content manager in social media, all the things that you guys already know. Today, I have a very special guest with me, which is from Far Owl Studios from the US. His name is Kai, and he's a fellow writer and someone who really cares about narrative in games. But before we go into that, I want to shout out to my amazing Patreons, and those are Feinoko, Zilgini, Angelissa, Fishbump Dev, and Peleg at the time of recording this. You guys are just amazing, and I love that you support the show with in every way you can, and you're such great members of my community. If you too want to support the show, you can go to theindiediarist.com and find links to Patreon, Coffee, just if you want to leave a one-time donation, and even links to my Discord server and my social media channels, if you want to join me and say hi off the record, I suppose. But anyway, without further ado, let's get into this episode number 27, Indie Diary number 27, with Far Owl Studios. Alright, hello everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Indie Diarist podcast, the show on the human stories behind indie game development. You may have heard from the intro, but this is your loyal Indie Diarist and host, Anthony L. Wolf, and today with me is Kai, someone from the indie game development community as usual. And Kai, well, tell the listeners a bit about yourself. What do you do, where you're based, and what you're working on right now?
Yeah, so you may know me as Kailoulou, and I'm the founder and lead creative director at Far Owl Studios, and we are currently working on Ethereal Metropolis. And to give you the quick gist of it, it's a narrative-driven, tile-based strategy game where you fight shadowy eldritch unicorn deer abominations while commanding a squad composed entirely of mythical creatures, and you do get to uncover the greatest lie ever told. And we are based out of the United States, but we have team members from all over the world.
Perfect. Yeah, well, that premise was perfectly clear from the demo that I played, and we'll get into that in a few questions. But first, it's an icebreaker. I always like to ask a fun question to my guests, and I've changed it recently. So if you listen to previous episodes, this will be new to you. If you could step into any game's world for a day, which one would it be, and why?
Ooh, that's such a good question because who would I be stepping into the world as? So like if I'm stepping into the world of The Witcher, I'd so want to be like a school of the Cat Witcher, or rather if I'm going into Cyberpunk, I want to be an edge runner, go into all of that. But if I'm going in just as myself, ooh, what would I would I think I would go into the into Baldur's Gate. Those are the three big games. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's a great answer, but also the ones that you mentioned before, actually, it's not something I had considered. Who are you stepping in as? Are you a witcher if you go into the witcher's world, or are you just a simple peasant just trying to live through their day and something? So, yeah,
that one peasant that goes, oh, that one Novigrad line.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, okay. It's an interesting answer, and also you mentioned Baldur's Gate. I suppose just the world of Baldur's Gate, which leads me to my next question, which is: think back to your childhood. What's your earliest or fondest gaming-related memory? I'm always curious to hear that.
Summer 2006. Booting up the family computer and playing Rome Total War.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. That was always fun, just seeing all the units on the battlefield just moving about and commanding the army.
You know, I'm a big fan of like RTS games and just all those war games and such, but I've never played a Total War.
Ooh, yeah.
I know. I've got like a bunch on my Steam account, but the problem is I know they will take a lot of commitment, and so I've always been kind of scared to try and get in, because I know I would pour a lot of time into them, and I'm not sure I want to. So
Rome Total War, the original Rome Total War is definitely one of the best ones to get into because the battles aren't overly complex. There is definitely a strategic layer and how you organize your army, move it about, and all that stuff. But battles, for the most part, last from like 10 to 20 minutes, and you don't have to worry about a whole lot of different layers of like strategic placement of your units on the battlefield, etc., etc.
Well, yeah, I'm sure I'm going to enjoy that. So I will give it a try. I'll find it, and I'm sure it will be somewhere like on GOG.com or something like that, or even Steam itself.
Yeah, likely. It is. It's on Steam.
Perfect. There you go. So, but yeah. So, well, you spent your childhood probably playing through all those games and such, and I can tell because of the demo of Ethereal Metropolis, and we'll get there again. But when did you realize you wanted to be a game developer? Was there a specific aha moment for you?
So there are two episodes. The first episode was like, I do want to be a game developer, and at my school there was this thing called the senior project, and for that I first started writing fan fiction.
No judgment there. I'm a writer,
but you can make the 2 and 2 right here with this next sentence with Ethereal Metropolis. I first started writing My Little Pony fan fiction.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, all the way back in like 7th grade. But hopping 5 years later, with the senior project, I did writing, and I was like, this is really fun. I want to be a game writer. But then the aha. And then pretty much a year later, beginning of college, I was like, when I first got into, it was at this convention where I was essentially doing a paper demo of Ethereal Metropolis with like a bunch of like Halo Wars, Risk, plastic minis, and just to represent the enemies and all that stuff, and it was just the process of people discovering it, and like me finding a whole bunch of stuff that I could improve upon. I was like, ooh, aha, that's the moment. It's that sort of sense of always improving with having a long-term vision and starting out somewhere that really made me excited, because it was like, hey, this is something tangential I could really do. And also along with the fact that I've always wanted to make my own video games. I know that sounds a bit odd in context of this narrative, but I just didn't know where exactly. And so for a lot of people it's like that. So I just kind of dove right in, just made my first paper game, and I've just been, that's one of the big principles about my game design is, can I easily translate this back into paper? Because one of the really fundamental things about games is that there's this implied sense of agreement between you and the player, or you and yourself. So like a perfect case study of this is a board game I absolutely love is Wingspan. There's this Wingspan automata, and you play against the game itself, but you're also playing against yourself, and you play within the confines of those rules, and see if you break those rules, the game just completely collapses in on itself. So there's always that sort of implied agreement of like, hey, here's the rules, the rules of play, you would say. And so that's been, but to answer your question, aha was about when I was doing my game Ethereal Metropolis on paper first. So I apologize. That was a tangent.
Oh, no. But it was a really interesting tension, because it leads me into my next question really nicely, which is, how did you become a game developer? In the sense that it looks like you've been wanting to do it for a long time. So at college, did you do that? Did you do like development and such? Or it doesn't sound, it sounds like you may have done something else. Yeah, exactly.
No, I was at Colgate University
Hmm.
studying French and computer science.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
So like yeah, it's a bit the computer science does relate to it, but how the heck does French relate into game design? Well, it's
Yeah,
just cultural
absolutely.
studies.
Yeah.
Cultural
Okay.
studies of the various of France's culture over the epochs.
Well, then I guess this question will actually be tied into what I'm going to ask later, so we'll get back to it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so is Ethereal Metropolis the very first game you ever developed?
Yeah, it's like the very first fully fledged. I've done some like tiny Unreal Engine editor projects, but Ethereal Metropolis is the very first from pre-production to production to release. It's my very first game. Yeah.
And is there something about those projects that you mentioned, very small, as you mentioned in Unreal, that you've learned and has influenced then your work on Ethereal Metropolis now?
Yeah. The biggest helpful tools that have really helped are actually the landscape editors and also prefabbing meshes into what are called blueprints. And it's essentially I can take a bunch of like individual walls, windows, and all that stuff, and it's essentially like Legos. I was a big Lego kid when I was younger too, and I just build these things. I'm like, okay, looks good. I throw it all into there. I throw the blueprint into there, and then voila, that's pretty much those are the two biggest tools I've learned to use.
Perfect. Yeah. In
Some
terms of
influence.
now moving on to Ethereal Metropolis, actually, and this is where things get interesting for the listeners, most likely, because Ethereal Metropolis, what is it? It's a turn-based top-down RPG. Is that right? Correct me if I'm wrong. And it's as you mentioned, it is very narrative heavy. Although in the demo that I tried, the narrative is already present, but I'm sure it will be much more fleshed out by the time. It was a pre-alpha demo for listeners' reference, but yeah, I'm sure it will be much more fleshed out. It sounds like you have a pretty good world in mind. So, during the
Yeah.
development of Ethereal Metropolis so far, was there a particular challenge that has left a mark on you? Any big learnings that you can share with other devs?
Yeah. Hmm. It's actually creature design.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the hold on, I'm collecting my thoughts right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So one of the most interesting characters that we've designed is actually the ranged damage dealer, Arishidat. She is what is called a Tornashian, and we essentially said, okay, you know how cats are like super squishy and flexible, and you can make them bend into all sorts of shapes? We kind of
Mm-hmm.
said, like, what if we took that flexibility and applied it to a griffin? And and that's one of the things that we have had to do the with her is when we were in her design stage, we went through God knows how many designs for her. We started out with like a pigeon design, and then like some regal bird, and then after several more iterations, it was the golden eagle. We had to figure out her anatomy, how buff she was, and like how does it look when she's standing up and when
Mm-hmm.
she's on her all fours, and like various poses and all that stuff. So it was really fun and was definitely challenging. One of the things that we learned is that it's okay to break anatomy of creatures in a very believable way, and we do that a lot with Ethereal Metropolis. Like, for example, we're currently working with a creature called the Cephali. The Cephali has a bunch of tentacles on its back, and it's very snake-like, despite it being a shadowy unicorn deer abomination. And one of the things, and we've learned that the best processes to break anatomy is actually to infuse the movement of other creatures into that creature. So like with the Cephali, we combined sort of an octopus and a snake, and we threw it into the context of a deer. And so we ask ourselves, okay, so how exactly does that move? And that's been really fun. So I'd say don't be afraid to break break the norm. I think that's like one of the cool things that indies have. We don't have like popular trends breathing down our necks at times.
Yeah, you don't have huge investors wanting you to create the next, I don't know, Fallout in space. And so you can take more risks. That is absolutely true. Well then, clearly turn-based top-down RPGs or games in general are your bread and butter. What exactly inspired you to start developing Ethereal Metropolis? Like when you were in front of that piece of paper and you were like, okay, let's put this game on paper. What inspired that?
It was actually my love for XCOM. Big fan of the XCOM series. I've played through Enemy. I haven't played the previous generation of XCOMs, but I've played through Enemy Unknown, Enemy Within, multiple playthroughs on that, XCOM and XCOM 2 and XCOM Chimera Squad, all the modern day stuff, and it was just like, I really like this format. But one of the things about the XCOM series is that one, the arms race is very static. Like a lot of people laud the arms race, but the thing is that it's not really an arms race, because you always know when the triggers for like the next stage evolution on that. It's not a tango, essentially, like a real arms race, because if you, this is also part of like my sort of military nerd history. Arms races in history, human history, has always been a tango back and forth. You have one side developing one technology and then the other side developing a counter technology and reverse engineering that technology. And so one of the things about the XCOM series is that it doesn't quite implement that. And so that's one of the big things that I wanted to personally improve upon in the formula. And two, it was a bit rigid at times. It was a bit rigid, and that rigidity definitely had its strengths, especially when it came to the quote-unquote gunplay and maneuvering of the characters. Like, it definitely allowed for more precise and strategic movement, whereas what I wanted to do specifically with the strategy is to make the movement more fast-paced and fluid, allowing sort of imbuing still having that importance of movement in the game itself, but you don't need to be as precise, and the difficulty comes in rather with the timing and the usage of abilities that the characters have.
Right. Well, yeah, I like what you said about the arms race and reverse engineering. I feel like that is something that's missing from a lot of tactical games, to be fair. The fact that it's kind of like your own independent thing, your own independent world. I remember, of course, I've got memories of Civilization, where other civilizations develop like technologies, and you kind of do your own thing and hope to catch up. But yeah, it would be that is a very interesting concept, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how you develop it in Ethereal Metropolis, because and so, of course, you mentioned that you're part of Far Owl Studios. What is the story behind your studio? Like, how did it come to be?
Well, I went to one of my friends, and I was like, "Hey, can you draw this piece of art?" It was actually one of the characters in the game, who's a minor character, and his name is Goreseitsum. And and then that's just what jump started the idea. I'm like, okay, like I have this idea for a potential place that Crusadum could find himself in. Okay, it needs more people in there. Okay, what's the history behind this place? And it just kind of spiraled from there. And it first started out as like a text-based role-playing game, but then eventually, as the game became more mechanically complex, and like my love for XCOM kind of married both of them together into what is essentially now Ethereal Metropolis, which now features a whole entire society of unicorn deer called Servinians, the shadowy eldritch unicorn deer abominations, which were former Servinians existing in this world, psionics, the greatest lie ever told, and just kind of ballooned from there. It isn't anything glamorous. It's just like just started out with a simple piece of artwork, just continue to evolve, and just the desire to make games.
That's still glamorous, though. Like, it started from a piece of artwork, and then it evolved, and it became something what you guys are today, which in itself is really amazing. But here's something I want to focus on as a writer myself. The fact that one of your vision, or one of your values anyway, or your ambition, is to create games that blend gameplay and narrative well. So why is that so important to you guys? Is it just because you're a writer, or do you see like something else in your vision there?
It's not. It is partly because I am a writer, but it's also one of the big issues that a lot of games have to tackle, specifically in narrative design, is bringing together this gameplay. Literally just yesterday, while I was taking my time off, I finished Cyberpunk Phantom Liberty, and I'm not going to spoil it, but one of the most major plot points for one of the branching endings was told to you. It was told to you, and mind you, it was told very well. But see, the thing is, it was told. It wasn't experienced. And the mechanics and gameplay allow you to experience those sort of story beats, the evolution of your character, and so forth. And so, one of the things that we're trying to do with Ethereal Metropolis is that character growth is inherently tied to the development of the character themselves. So for one of the features in our game is lore cards, and essentially as you unlock more and more lore cards by investing more ability points into a character's skill tree, you get more of their backstory, but they also evolve with them discovering themselves and finding resolution as to why they came to Cervene. And there's kind of a joint merger of those two in the progression of their characters. Does that make sense?
That does make sense, and it's actually a beautiful concept. It reminds me like the kind of things that we do on D&D campaigns, or even as a Call of Cthulhu keeper, I did that quite a lot too. Like, you want those characters to come into your world with their own set of motivations, and then have them grow while they face the world and the main conflict of the story. So actually, that sounds really interesting. And the concept of lore cards, the fact that they discover more about themselves, and by doing so, they unlock new ways to just face the dangers that they lay ahead. I mean, it's really a really interesting concept, and yeah, I can see precisely how it blends gameplay and narrative, which is a really, really interesting thing to think about. So yeah.
Oh, thanks.
Oh no, don't worry. I like when things work in terms of writing, and as a big writer myself, not big writer, but as a writer myself, big fan of writing. Then I enjoy those things too. But here's something. Now that we're getting a bit more deep and emotional, why are you a game developer? What drives you forward? And I believe you've answered this question here and there, but it's always nice to focus around this concept. Why?
I just want to make kick-ass games. Like,
all right.
That's it. That's literally it. I just want to make, like, I mean, I can go all hoity-toity, like, oh, video games provide such a transcendental experience. No, I just want to make kick-ass games.
You want to make kick-ass games that are fun, yeah.
Yeah, they're just fun and meaningful. Like, that's just it. I've always liked games, and I just want to make my own. I want to throw my hat into the ring.
I think it's very simple, and it's simple in the good way, of course. So it's a really great little ambition there that you have. Well, little, it's pretty big as an ambition in itself. So, but I mean, we've talked about the beauty of being an indie game developer, the fact that you can take risks and such. That is potentially also one of the negative sides or so. But what is your biggest struggle as an indie game developer?
Ooh, the isolation. The isolation of it all. So, like, even when I am working with my team, I'm still like, I have to think like several weeks ahead, and everyone else is not thinking several weeks ahead. They're thinking right now. Like, okay, what's my current card? What am I working on and all that stuff? And like you're always working, you're not working in the vacuum, but it feels like a vacuum of time.
And if I can ask, how do you cope with that? What is your way of dealing with that?
It's just me saying to myself, you've planted the seed and you just have to be patient. You just have to, it's like growing a tree or a plant. You plant the seed, it's there, it remains dormant for a little bit, and then you just wait patiently and make sure that nothing goes wrong. Inevitably, something's going to go wrong. That's just game development for you.
Yeah.
But it's minimizing how badly that thing can go wrong. And so just being patient, just saying, hey, this is going to bear fruit, but not right now. And then as for like the social isolation, I force myself to go outside. Well, force myself to go outside at times, go for runs, talk to people, what else? And then also just talking with my friends online. I tried, as for like talking with my coworkers on Ethereal Metropolis, I usually just talk more about the project and just see what they're doing, and that makes me super excited.
Yeah, well, I mean, basically you force yourself to take care of yourself, which is something very difficult for indie game developers usually, because a lot of people that I know are solo developers even. They don't even have a team, so they kind of stay in that bubble. But I'd like to go back to one thing that you said, which is that's game development for you. It is one thing that I was talking about in my Discord server just recently with some of my peeps, and someone said, I realized recently why game development can feel so depressing at times. And it's the fact that we as game developers are constantly looking for what's wrong and never focusing on what is positive. There are always bugs, there are always things to fix, there are always problems to solve. And it's hard to take a step back and look at what you've done so far and be like, oh, actually, I've done quite a lot. So I think that is a really important thing to do for people who are either working in teams like you or working by themselves. Something really, really important to keep in mind. But yeah, so well, we've done all the emotional bits, so now let's do something a little bit more fun.
Okay.
Imagine writing a letter to yourself, but 10 years younger. What would you say?
Are you sure we went out of the emotional bits?
Well, it depends what you're going to say next. Because
just do it. Don't overthink it. Just start somewhere. First time is going to be... Can I swear?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. The first time is going to be shit. It's going to be so bad. But just do it. You got to start somewhere. And this goes to the point about like how we always have to be so critical about ourselves. I would also say the best way to reframe that self-criticality is to always have a sort of overarching goal. So one of the big things that I do for myself is that I have in like my personal Trello board, like, hey, here's the overarching goal. This is like what I want to accomplish. And just being like, okay, I made a step today towards that. Today. And so, but here, and then I identify, okay, so here's the step I've made. Like, what are some of the faults in that step? How can I take those faults and transform that into the next step forward?
It's a concept I love because it comes also from one of my favorite indie games ever, which is Outer Wilds. And the fact that the concept of, I don't know if you played it, but without spoiling it too much, the concept of failure there and learning from your mistakes is like a big part in the design system and the way they designed the game from the start. So it's something that really resonates deeply with me, apparently, because I love Outer Wilds so much. But I guess that is the consequence, not the cause.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. Totally recommend it. Yeah. Well, here's something that hopefully will be a bit more fun. If you had unlimited budget and time, what game would you create?
That's such a good question. honestly, I just still if I had unlimited budget, I just bring on all the talent that I need right now for Ethereal Metropolis. It's just I'm pretty proud of the work that my team's done on Ethereal Metropolis so far.
Well, that's perfect answer. I mean, a lot of people say I would just be doing what I'm doing now, but better.
Yeah, exactly. It would be better, but it's just like I want to get this game out now, and just it's not that I've grown tired of it. I'm just eager to bring it to people and put it in their laps and say, play my game, please.
I think it's what I always say when people say, oh yeah, I would do the exact same game I'm doing now, but bigger or better or just faster. What I always say is, it sounds like you're on the right track then, because it sounds like you're doing something that you really want to do, regardless of time or budget. So you could see it that way. Yeah, so apparently we're not out of the emotional bits yet. It's okay. Well, I thought we were. But yeah, okay. Well, I guess we're almost done now. It's time for some parting words. But one thing that I want to ask you is, well, first, is there anything that you would like to say that we weren't able to cover today?
Let's see. Hot take. People should be transferring from Unity over to Unreal, and Unreal isn't as daunting as you make it out to be. Unreal has a lot of great accommodating features. I've been snooping around GameDev servers and be like, oh my gosh, Unreal Engine's so daunting, because they market themselves as so daunting. That's the thing. They always show off these like ultra mega scans, super complex environments, and like, brother or sister or whatevs, you don't need to get in. You don't need to be recreating that. You can literally just start playing. Just start playing around with like the pre-made levels, just toying around, breaking it, patching it back together, and all that stuff.
Yeah, fun. It's the best way to learn an engine, from what I've found. I've only ever played around in Unity, but it's not like I'm going to do that again. So, especially after what happened recently. But yeah, and the second thing I wanted to ask you is, as a writer, what is something unique that you think is unique about your approach to game development that other people can take from you?
I like to place normal people in extraordinary circumstances. Like one of the biggest. I just finished about a week ago. I finished watching Band of Brothers, and that is such a well-written show. And like, obviously, it's inspired by real life events of the 101st Division Airborne. But one of the things, and they're landing at D-Day, Bastogne, and their time in the Alps. But one of the things is that, like, if you took that context away and you just sort of rebranded it and like took away the historical context, that would have been such an extraordinary show. Because you have all these ordinary people like Captain Winters or Garnier, or all these people who find themselves in such crazy circumstances, and it shows how exactly they are getting through it, not coping with it, but getting through it and relying upon each other. And it makes for such great character development. And obviously the life imitates art thing is, no, it's art imitates life. Because life can, like, when it gets crazy, it gets crazy.
Okay, well, now it's actually time for some parting words, which is, where can other people find you, and if they do, how can they best support you?
Cool. So, how you best can support us is that by the time that this is uploaded, we'll be in the midst of our Kickstarter campaign. So if you're listening to this, go to Kickstarter, look up Ethereal Metropolis, and support us on our Kickstarter page. So support us on our Kickstarter page if you want to support an ambitious indie developer studio that's seeking to create essentially what is a very unique world, to put it lightly, I guess. And and like you'll get a ton of rewards, and if you support us high enough, you'll even get your own character in Ethereal Metropolis, and they'll be featured in paintings within the game. And like like the next tier up is essentially a 3D model of your character in the background while players are going about their day, about the home base. So there's that. And then what else? But if you don't want to give us your money, totally understand. Things are a bit dicey right now. But you can support us on our Twitter, or what is now called X, at Far Owl Studio, simply at Far Owl, or just look up Ethereal Metropolis hashtag. We always post to that, obviously. And then give us a follow on our YouTube. Just look up Far Owl Studios or Ethereal Metropolis. That's pretty much it.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Kai. It's been a pleasure having you on the show, and always nice to talk to a fellow writer. I think there are always great things to learn from each other. So it's been amazing having you here. Thank you for your time, and well, good luck with the Kickstarter campaign, Ethereal Metropolis, and everything. I'm definitely looking forward to the final release.
Thank you very much, Anthony.
And that's a wrap on another beautiful episode of the Indie Diarist podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to Kai, who's been a lovely guest. Always lovely to catch up with a fellow writer. As I mentioned in the end, there's always something to learn for everybody, especially me, I would say. But yeah, so if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show, leave a rating, 5 stars, please. It pleases the gods of the algorithm, and you can find the show on pretty much every platform where podcasts are made, excluding YouTube. For now, more to come on that later. If you want to support the show, you can also find links on theindiediarist.com. You can find links to Discord to join the community, the Patreon and Coffee if you want to leave a donation or subscribe for a tier, and there are loads of benefits if you choose to do so, including bonus access, preview access to episodes, bonus content, and a lot more. Lastly, if you're an indie game developer yourself, please get in touch, because I would love to hear from you and to tell your story to my listeners who are always hungry for incredible stories from the indie game development community. Speak to you next time.